Halftime reminded me a lot of Live from the Barbecue because the way how Nas has had that aggressive, yo, I'm about to just show y'all motherfuckers why I'm the best. What's so funny?
You get the whole track.
I'm just going by my experience, man. Like, this is crazy. Like, I'm just...
Go ahead, B. I'm listening, man.
I'm loving it, man.
Yeah, man. Hey, you on the rocket chair right
I'm
now,
not
B.
laughing because this is like stupid. I'm laughing because you never talk this much unless you do one of these.
You're on your rocket chair on the front porch. Go.
Yeah,
Just go.
every single track.
I just remember when I first listened to this album, like, I just remember, like, in my room, in the boombox, like, this is crazy. I remember my dad was like, what are you listening to? I'm like, I'm listening to Illmatic. You know, come back later. Like, come back.
Bopping heads, there's no stopping it. Mainly when the music is classic. You know when you have that album, you can play every track back to back. Asking everybody, have you heard of that? I know you heard of poets exposing their most personal notions over some of the dopest instrumentals. One time for your mental, 2 times for your mental. Just tell us what you were into by putting your vote in for your favorite classics. Hey, it won't take long. Go to thatinhiphop.com. It'll be up every month for you to choose and for us to review. Shit, we taking it back, y'all. Take it back.
Hey guys, it's your host Sophie filling in for Rock, and since it's the 20th anniversary of Nas's Illmatic, we are here with a classic album review, and we're gonna talk about it.
20 years, man. 20 years later, bro.
20 years ago, I was in fucking 7th grade, man. I remember it was me and 2 of my best friends went to, you know, usual record stores up at Fairlane Mall, looking in the cassette. This was right before I got a CD player that same year, of course, when I got Ready to Die. But right before I got it, I still had my boombox, my little cassette player. Went, got it. I was like, when I heard first, originally first heard Halftime on the Zebrahead soundtrack back in '92, and I was just like, yo, man, I was like, who's this dude on here that's like killing this, like, wow, man, this dude is crazy. So I didn't think nothing. No, I thought that was just a track he just had, just Halftime, bam. Then actually went back and heard his verse off of Breaking Adams with Large Professor, Alive at the Barbecue, and I was like, yo, whoever this dude, this Nas cat, man, I can't wait for him to drop it. I was like, do he got an album out yet or anything? And this was like 93, going into 94. Then I heard The Word Is Yours. I saw that video. That shit fucking blew my mind. I mean, that Pete Rock, that Ahmad Jamal sample, man, that Pete Rock did, flip, oh my God. And the way Nas was just flowing that shit, man, it sounded like he was like, on some cloud, like in the clouds and shit, just rhyming, man. I thought that shit was amazing, so I heard that. And then on the Detroit radio station, I heard It Ain't Hard to Tell. This was still before the album, you know, came out, because, you know, back then you used to have singles to promote your album real good a lot. So, you know, I heard It Ain't Hard to Tell. So I was like, yo, man, like this dude, man, it was amazing. So when I first got the cassette, popped that bad boy in, you know, the genesis, the intro was just, even though it wasn't a song, but just I think just the moment of you getting prepared to listen to that album and the setup that you was getting ready to listen to on that album, man, was crazy. You know, with Nas's brother and then AZ, which I touch on AZ a little bit later, but I thought with the genesis and, you know, just Nas talking, it just sounded so gritty, so grimy, and just you know, they drinking, they being young, you know, being young dudes, man, and you know, yeah, and niggas represented Illmatic, Matic, and then that beat drop, man. Primo dropped that New York State of Mind beat. I was like, holy shit. Because, you know, back then, you know, it was kind of amazing because when I saw Primo, I was like, wow, this is the first time I'm seeing Primo working outside of the Gangstar group, you know, that whole camp. So I was like, wow, like he got Primo here? You know, straight out the fucking Dungeons of Rap. You know, I was like, man, this is my shit. So start off with New York State of Mind. Thought that shit was crazy. I was like, wow, way to start an album off with that. I think I liked it because I think at that time when I was listening to New York State of Mind, I felt like I was in New York. I felt like I was, you know, walking in the streets of New York, even though I had never been in New York until, you know, before that when that song came out. But it just took me, I'm like, wow, he's describing like New York. He's taking me through Queens, he's taking me through Brooklyn, he's taking me through parts of New York that I'm thinking like, wow, this is crazy. So then they went to Life's a Bitch, had that Kool in the Gang sample. I was like, okay, wow, this is crazy. Or, you know, Nas says, yeah, you know, his wife is go to 20s, and, you know, wife go to Washington, you know how we go. And then AZ, man, dropped one of the, like, best guest features verses I've ever heard, man. Like, I don't want to rhyme the whole thing, because I'm just, like, going on. No, I'm not going to do it, Mike. I'm not going to do it. No, I'm not going to do it.
Might as well, man.
No, I'm not going to do it. But anyway, that verse, man, AZ fucking mashed that shit, man. Like, it was so many quotables in that damn verse alone. I was just like, dude, I remember when I first played, I rewinded. Rewind that verse again. That's the rewind noise. You press rewind, you know, when you rewind the radio. Don't look at me like that, Mike. Then it went to The World Is Yours. Like I said, I think that's still, even though this album is like great, that's still my favorite song on that album, man. The World Is Yours. It's just something about that sample, man. That Ahmad Jamal sample, man. It's crazy, and Nas just fit that shit so well. I remember after listening to this album, I kept telling my dad about it, like telling my dad, my mother about it. They was like, yeah, you keep playing that The World Is Yours song all over and over again. I keep hearing that same piano loop or whatever. But yeah, halftime. Then it went to halftime. One Love. After halftime went to Memory Lane. Went to Memory Lane, which was another good primo joint. I think Nas even said that was a track he wasn't feeling the most at first when he was making that album, was Memory Lane. But I thought Nas captured it. He captured the whole instrumental well. Then it went to One Love, which is the one Q-Tip produced joint, which was so funny.
Don't go, man.
We're listening, dog.
Which I thought it was, and when you talk about storytelling, I thought with One Love he took storytelling to I think another level. You know, of course, big up to Slick Rick and everything that he's done in the art of storytelling. But I thought One Love was a great storytelling track. It really, I'm like, man, not only this dude is spitting and lyrical, he's telling stories, like vivid stories, which is crazy. And if you listen to the third verse of One Love, they actually use that scene in Belly. I don't even know if you're familiar with Belly. You watch it? Yeah. The scene when Nas was talking to the young kid and he gave him some juice, that's the whole One Love third verse. Like, I don't know if you peeped that out.
So you've been doing education.
Yeah.
You've been doing that education.
It's schooling us, man.
If you watch Belly, that whole One Love third verse, that was that scene. Like, Hype Williams wanted to create that whole scene from One Love because he thought that verse was so ill, that storytelling was so ill, so he made it.
Oh, Rain Man ass. How do you even know this shit? What the fuck?
He's a super fan.
I'm saying.
He knows everything about the people he loves.
I'm gonna make it short. I'm about to finish that. One time for your mind. One time for your mind. You know, bam. Okay, that's another great track as well. Then it went to Represent. Yeah, that was, oh man, Primo again, man. It was just like, that was at that time. And then speaking of Primo and Pete Rock, that was during that time where they were like the East Coast Dr. Dre. As far as like, if you're on the East Coast and you want to work with some top-notch producers in the New York scene, Primo and Pete Rock were like the dudes. So for Nas to get them guys on there, and no shots to Large Professor. Large Professor did his thing too on the production because he produced it, Ain't Hard to Tell, which is my second favorite track on there, and he closed it out with Ain't Hard to Tell, and I was like, man, I remember after I finished playing, I was like, I called my boy, I was like, man, you gotta listen, you gotta come over here, because this back then you had word of mouth, so you call your boys and tell them to come over or whatever, and check out what I got, or peep this album out. So I'm like, yo man, you gotta listen to this shit, man. This shit would change your life. Like I was like so hyped. I was like, man, this shit would change your life. Like, you remember when I heard that Stevie Wonder, you know, the songs to keep your life? Yeah, I'm like, man, that shit just changed my life, man. Like, this shit's crazy. He's like, all right, man, you got any extra blank cassettes? Because, you know, back then, you still want to hear it for yourself. You wanted your boy to make a copy of it for you. Like, yeah, I got right. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, so it was just like, I just remember the word of mouth. I was telling everybody, grown-ups, kids my age, I'm like, you gotta listen to Nas Illmatic. This joint is tight. You know, I had my little cassette tape and everything. So it's crazy, man. I think this album it's crazy when you look at it 20 years. It just puts everything in perspective. Like, wow, like, this album has stood the test of time for 20 years, and it still is as amazing as when I listened to it for the first time. You know what I'm saying? So, shout out to Illmatic. I'm done.
My first introduction to Nas was I Am, and honestly, that's my favorite Nas album. It wasn't for a long time though. Like, It Was Written was my favorite Nas album for the longest, and not until like recently this year, because I always loved it. It's always been like in my top 2 or 3, but I sat down. I always like sat. And I just like said, I'm not doing anything but listening to this, because there was always beats and stuff that I listened to, and I'm like, okay, this is, like, I liked it, but I never loved it. And I sat down with nothing else. Kind of like we were talking about the Wu-Tang thing, just the museum. Like, I just closed myself off, and I was like, holy fuck, by far this is my favorite album. Like, it's not even close. But It Was Written, I came back to it later, man, and you know, it kind of reaffirms what Nas was for me. Like, it was interesting to go back and hear like wow, you started, like, you were already up here when you started. So going to where you, like all of these other albums, it wasn't a far stretch. You know what I'm saying? But I never had that nostalgic feeling with Illmatic. It never connected with me like that. I think that for me, it wasn't a great album. Like when I listened to it, like you were talking about New York State of Mind. Like to me, New York State of Mind Part 2 is better than the first one for me. You know what I'm saying? For me, he was even more vivid on New York State of Mind Part 2. So I don't know, maybe because I got into him later. You know what I'm saying? So like the first album that I listened to is now my favorite album of Nas. And maybe if I would have got into Nas earlier and Illmatic was the first one, I'd probably feel the same way. You know, as I've gotten older, you know, and even when I was that young, like I listened to it, I was like, okay, yeah, I don't like it, whatever, and I just kept it moving. But when I got older and I, you know, like really wanted to listen and really try to break it down, I was just like, I marveled at it, you know what I'm saying? Because I'm not taking anything away, but it just, I never had a connection. And it's a good album to me, but you know, 20 years, the fact that everybody, you know, almost every hip hop head knows this album. Like B, I guess certain these classic albums, we're not gonna be able to get B to, you know, because he's gonna go on and on. It's just, I don't have that same type of connection to Illmatic. Whether you like it or not, you should at least check it out, because a lot of the people that you probably like now have been inspired by this one particular album. You should at least go back and be like, well, shit, what the fuck did you hear? You know what I'm saying? So I definitely respect Nas. Like Nas is definitely one of my favorites all time, and I definitely respect Illmatic. But again, you know, I'm politely saying it's definitely not my favorite. But you know, classic album, man. Definitely go check that shit out if you haven't, because I know we have a young demographic.
1994, man. I was graduating high school and shit.
That nigga's working on his second master's. That nigga like, I'm gonna get that second master's. I'm gonna go for that doctorate. And can't nobody tell me nothing.
You know what's coming, man. I don't even know why you act like you don't know.
I didn't know, and I think a lot of us didn't know that it would turn out to be this. You know, because again, man, there was so many good albums out. You know, and this was just one in the rotation. You know, I was just playing this, and I'll rotate something else out, and that was it. It was a continuous thing. The funny thing about this album is that it's such a gift and a curse for Nas, man, because you know he put out like his best work, and then he followed suit with, you know, followed that with, you know, it was written, and then that, and then, you know, we know the story, right? This was the standard that Nas set for himself that he was never able to live up to. And the funny thing about this album, the more, you know, when you listen to it and you reflect on it, is that if you change up anything, you know, it kind of changes the album. You know what I'm saying? Like this album, the producers, how it was sequenced, you know, everything has to be this way for it to be this body of work. Because the 10-year anniversary, I think even this one, and then even people that go and remix, you know, the songs, even if you change the beats, it changes how the album feels. You know what I'm saying? And you know, so it's hard to create a classic. You know, sometimes they just have to become what they are. And that's what this album was able to do. You think about the producers, I mean, we all knew they were great, but we didn't know that they would be what they are. How much would it cost to get these guys on your album now? Right. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And these were just guys that was just doing hip hop, doing something that they love in this culture, and they just got together, and this is what they put out. He was just putting out an album. That's all he was doing, and just writing his vivid tales. But the funny thing is, being like you were saying, Live at the Barbecue, he had everybody fiending when they heard that album, and then Halftime. And then he put Halftime on there because everybody was talking about Halftime, so he wanted to sell it. Yep. And then after that, people listened to it, and it just became what it became. And it's just astonishing to watch how this album has grown over years up to the point that it's at now. You know, and again, like I said, man, it was just one of those things where, you know, for me, it was just rotating albums in and out. You knew it was great. You knew you loved it. I wasn't running around talking about this was a classic, like they do now. It was like, yo, this shit is dope. And everybody listened to it, you know, it ain't hard to tell, you know, like you said, New York State of Mind when it came on, Represent, you know, One Love, where he was able to get a little bit softer. But the thing about this album that caught me the most, and you said this, FIFO, is that it put you here in New York. Like you could hear it. It felt grimy and gritty and dark. You felt like you were on the corner when you were listening to this, man. So, so again, I mean, you know, this album, what Nas was able to do lyrically, the beats, you know, the way it was sequenced, everything, it just embodied and captured, you know, New York. It captured the things that Nas went through and the things that Nas seen.
The first Nas album that I heard was actually Nostradamus. Wow. And the fact that I actually went back to Nas after that,
that is crazy. Yeah.
Crazy. Because remember I told you guys I wasn't fucking with this type of hip hop at the time. This was '94. I didn't fuck with Nas for years after that. Because I've heard songs, of course, I heard his singles, and I was like, that guy's pretty interesting, but you know, it wasn't enough to make me want to go buy an album or anything. But when I fucking heard Nostradamus, I was like, man, I'm done. I don't know what's up with this Nas guy, but I am not interested. I didn't give Nas another shot. I remember this vividly. I downloaded Illmatic and I threw it on my iPod because people were just bugging me about it. They're like, you need to listen to Illmatic. Nas' Illmatic is amazing. I'm like, all right, fine. Put it on my iPod and I was riding the subway back and forth to class. It clicked. That album, for me, it's beyond the whole beats and lyrics thing that y'all keep getting into. It's really the one point that you threw out. It makes you feel like you're in New York. I've been to New York before. This makes you feel like the streets and the subways of New York. It's a really special album that can do that. Where it can instantly transport you somewhere. No matter where it is. It could be Puerto Rico, it could be Jamaica, wherever. This album, it immediately takes you to New York. Everything about this says New York. It sounds like a New York subway. And it's like, it doesn't even have to be like, every New York album has to sound like this to represent New York, because I feel like Funk Crusher Plus is the same thing for me. When I put that on, I feel like I'm on this dirty ass streets and the dirty ass subways in New York. And that's what I love about this album. It's pure consistency. It sounds great from start to finish. There's not a single whack track on it. It's the perfect length. It's only like 35 minutes long. Yeah. It's the perfect length. It doesn't have enough time to be whack. You know what I mean?
That's a good point.
Like it jumps in with 11 tracks, right?
No, 10
tracks.
10 tracks, really not.
Well, a skit, yeah. Right, or the little intro thing. So 10 tracks of just pure, raw, grimy beats and dope ass lyrics, and that's really all I can say about this album. It's just, I didn't hear it until way later on, and this is what made me fall in love with Nas. This was not the first album I heard by Nas, but it's the first album that I loved by Nas. And then that made me go back and get I Am, and it was written. And then of course when Stillmatic came out, he was dissing Jay-Z. I was like, man, I love this guy, man. I love this guy. So yeah, it's easy to see why this is heralded as a classic, because it's a damn near perfect album. Great lyrics, and I remember around that time I had heard about his verse on, was that Search track where he said, you know, when I went to help stuff with Jesus, I'm waving automatic guns and nuns. Yeah. And I thought that was cool just because that was on my shit back then. So I was like, oh, this guy's probably cool, but I just didn't bother with him until way later on. And when you still go back and listen to that verse now, he was still killing it. Mm-hmm. If you go back and listen to that track now, Nas was still killing it back then as a child. Yep. Now he had to be what? 15, 16? When he did that?
Barbecue, yeah.
Man, no, I'm talking about the Search track.
Oh,
that was the first, whatever that track was that he was on with Search. Yeah, back to the grill again, Yeah, that track. Man, so yeah, that's really all I gotta say about this album. I'm not gonna go into deep song by song details. But yeah, I agree with everything B said about every single track. So yeah.
Awesome.
Think about Illmatic.
She ain't got no time for that. We ain't got no time for that.
Sure don't. Tapping out, man. Another classic album.
See you guys later.